Dre all day.
What's going on, everybody? Dre Baldwin, balloverseas.com, the Overseas Basketball Blueprint. Now let's talk about discipline. The discipline of being a professional athlete. For those of you who have not played at the professional level yet, or you haven't been a professional at anything just yet, I want you to understand that being a professional athlete is not just about having skill and just about having talent. Even though you must have skill and talent in order to make it, skill and talent alone is not enough, because there are plenty of people out there who have both who are not professionals, especially in the sports world. The thing about the sports world, as opposed to being a lawyer or a doctor or an online influencer, is that the positions and the opportunities are not unlimited. They are limited, meaning on a basketball team, only 12 people could be on the roster, and then you factor in a couple for the injured reserve, but there's a limit. There's a certain number of people who can be on every roster on every professional basketball team in the world, which means if you were to count up all the teams in the world and count up all those roster spots, do the math, that's how many people can play pro basketball. And if you are an American player looking to play internationally outside of the USA, understand that there are more rules aside from the roster limits that factor into how many Americans can have a job. In some leagues abroad, some leagues only allow teams to have one American player, or maybe they allow two. I've seen leagues where they allow 6 or 7, but there's always a limit. And even in leagues where you can have as many Americans as you want, teams usually don't do that because they're not trying to just have Americans. They're trying to build up their own local players and build up their own program and make their country's players better. So there's going to be some local guys on every team, no matter how many Americans they're going to have on the roster. And at the same time, you have to factor in costs, because it costs money to bring an American on the team, as I've talked about in previous content. All this being said, what we're talking about here is discipline. To be a professional, again, the skill and the talent matter, but there's a limit. And one of the things that separates skilled and talented amateurs who never leave the amateur ranks, players whose basketball careers end with them still being amateurs, i.e. they never became a professional, never signed a contract, never played anywhere consequential that matters. What separates those players, what keeps those players there at the amateur level, that is overcome and handled by the players who get to the professional level, is the discipline necessary to get there. And there are 3 specific aspects of that discipline that I'm going to share with you here. The first one is your willingness and your ability to show up every single day and do the work. Now, while this one sounds simple enough, actually, everything I'm going to say here is going to be very simple. Everything I'm going to say here is going to be very, quote-unquote, common sense. Everything I'm going to say here is going to be very, quote-unquote, basic. And you know why I need to say it anyway? Is because even though everyone claims they understand things, anytime somebody calls something common sense or basic, that's their way of saying, well, I already knew that. I already understand that. You're not telling me anything groundbreaking. You're not telling me anything new. That's cool. That's how you feel. My question to you then is, the follow-up to that is, how often are you executing it? Now, if you know something to be basic and common sense, my question is, how often are you doing it? All right, and have you taught it to anybody else? And can you show me some examples of you actually using it in your life and creating an outcome? Most people don't have answers to those questions, even though they may say, well, what you're talking about is basic and common sense. The reason why I have to keep repeating over and over again things that are basic and common sense is because most people ignore them, because they're looking for this big idea that is so groundbreaking and so different and so new that they would never have thought of it, and they think that's going to be the key to their success. The fact of the matter is, it's not. If everyone really understood this at the really core level, all right, podcasting would not be podcasting, YouTube would not be YouTube, self-publishing of books wouldn't be self-publishing of books, because there would be no need for as much content out there as there is, because all people would do is just go off the basics and it'd be done, it'd be over. All right, Wikipedia or something could be the only website we need. We wouldn't need everybody to have a blog, podcast, a book, a YouTube channel, Instagram, motivational posts, or none of that, because everybody would just go off the basics and follow it and it'll all be done. But since the world is imperfect and us human beings, we are not perfect, then we got to go over these things more than once. So the first one, showing up every single day to do the work. As a professional athlete, you're going to have practice every day. And I want y'all to understand that you earn your position, you earn your job, and you keep your job in practice. Yes, the games matter, because if you play terribly in the games, you probably won't have a job for too long. But if you're not willing to show up every single day and work hard in practice, you can lose your job for that as well. especially as an American playing abroad, because the local players, the way that the whole game is set up ostensibly is that your presence as an American player, those of you who are Americans, those of you who are not, if you're an import player somewhere else, they're going to be looking at you the same way. They're going to be looking at you as a person who, because you're coming from the outside into their country, that you know the game better, you can play the game better, you're more talented, and your presence is going to inspire and motivate and teach the local players to raise their game. And that starts with what you do every single day. It's not just you scoring 30 points in a game. It's about how you show up to the conditioning workouts, to the weightlifting sessions, to the practices every single day. And depending on the league you play in, you may have a lot more practices than you have games. I played on teams where we had more games than practices. The coach didn't have us practice much at all. And I've been on teams where we practiced 10 times for every one game. And what if you don't get that much playing time in the game? Now you might have 20 practices in one game. And you got to be ready for that. And if you don't work hard in those practices, they'll get rid of you because obviously you're not ready to be a professional. A professional shows up every single day and does the work in the dark just to get the opportunity to do their job in the light. So understand that 90% of your work as a professional athlete, nobody will ever see it. It won't be on Instagram. It will not be on YouTube. It's the things that only the people who are in the room are going to know about. And understand this is one aspect of being a professional basketball player that does not factor in if you want to be a street ball basketball player, you want to be a YouTube basketball player, you want to be an Instagram basketball player, a TikToker doing trick shots. As a professional athlete on a team, this is the part that separates you from all those other categories that I just said. Are you willing to do it? So the first one is showing up every single day and doing the work. The second aspect of the discipline of being a professional athlete is realizing and embracing the fact that this is the thing that you're doing. All right, this is the job. The practice every single day is the job. I don't know if any of you ever saw the TV show The Wire. And there was one part of this show, if you didn't see the show, it was okay. They were following around these homicide police detectives. Their job was to, when a dead body showed up and it was ruled a homicide, to figure out who did it, right? So one of the homicide detectives was talking to another one, and he was getting a little bit restless because he's like, man, why we got to go through all these details, and we got to do this, and we got to look this part up, and we got to go through all this paperwork. And it was a big case. They had all this work they were going to have to do to try to solve the case. And one of the older detectives, who was a little bit more experienced, he looked at the younger detective and he said, detective, this is the job. You think the job is running around and busting people upside the head and ripping and running and going to court and testifying? No, that's not the job. The job is this stuff that we do sitting here in this office, going through this paperwork, getting to the details of a case, looking at the evidence over and over again until we figure it out. This is the job. As a professional athlete, the job is the discipline. All right, the job is not scoring all the points in the game or posting your highlights on IG. That's not the job. You might think that's the job, but the actual job is the discipline. Okay, and if you didn't know, now you know. The third thing, we're talking here about discipline. If you're going to be a professional basketball player, is to be a professional. Again, I've said this already, but I'm going to keep saying it. I'm going to say it again in this video. I'm going to say it again in a future video. And if you look at any of my old stuff, I know I've said this before. I'm going to keep saying it. If you want to be a professional, discipline is the most important mental aspect you will need. Yes, the other ones matter. Yes, you need to have initiative. Yes, you need to be confident. Yes, you need to be mentally tough. All those matter too. All right, that's the work on your game pillars, those four. But discipline is the most important one, simply because most people don't want to be disciplined. Everybody knows about discipline. Most people don't execute discipline. The reason why most people don't get results in life consistently is because they are not disciplined consistently. They're not doing the work consistently. They're not doing the same things over and over and over and over again, because that's boring. It is not exciting. It's not, who gets enthusiastic about doing the same thing over and over and over again, especially something that becomes monotonous and mundane. And I don't care what it is you're doing. You do anything over and over and over again every day, it will eventually become monotonous and mundane. Name anything that you think is exciting. It's probably because you haven't done it enough times yet. All right. You do it enough times, it becomes boring, it becomes mundane. You need something different. You need to change it up. This is what most people do in life, and this is why most people don't become professionals at the things that they truly want to be pros at, because they don't have the discipline to stick to it. You got to ask yourself if you had a discipline to stick to it. I can't answer that question, but you can. So what we're talking about here is being a professional basketball player, especially playing ball overseas. You got to have the discipline. 3 specific things. Number 1, showing up every single day doing the work. Number 2, understanding that Showing up every day and doing the job is what's going to separate you from the amateurs out there, and what's going to keep you having your job, and is what's going to be expected of you by the team that signs you, even though they may never actually say this to you. I'm saying it to you. And number three, this is what makes you a professional. The professionalism of the job is what you're doing every day in practice. It is not what you do in the games. It is not when you post your highlights. It is not any of that. It is what you do every single day in practice. For those of you who have not yet got your free copy of my book, The Overseas Basketball Blueprint, 237-page book, tells you everything you need to get started in the pro basketball world. On top of that, we got the book about the business side of pro basketball called Overseas Basketball Secrets. On top of that, we got the Agents book, Basketball Agents Decoded. And on top of that, we got the Exposure Camp book, The Truth About Overseas Basketball Exposure Camps. The 4-book Overseas Blueprint bundle. If it's not available yet, it's going to be available really soon. If it is available, it is down there in the description. If it's not in the description, it's because it's not available yet, but we are working on it right now. Stay tuned. Make sure you get your free copy of the Overseas Basketball Blueprint by going to balloverseas.com. That link is down there. Work on your game. Dre all